Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. We have California spending over $17 billion for the homelessness crisis, and the homeless population grew. We have world food prices going up by the most in 1.5 years. And we even have the stock market having the best performance since 1997. Let's go ahead and get started. From the beginning of the year to July, the stock market has now had its best performance since until July in 26 years. It's 1997. But we do have a situation where analysts now are starting to brace for lower earnings for a lot of these corporations. So we kind of have a dichotomy where the stock market is doing great, but the numbers of the companies aren't doing as great, especially as you look at the previous results. Analysts now are bracing for an over 7% earnings decline from a year ago and a third consecutive quarter of falling profits. Overall markets were mostly negative across the board in North America. Canada was also lower, probably because Trudeau announced that he's divorcing his wife. And also one thing that was really interesting this week that I heard on Joe Rogan from PBD, Pat Bet David, is that 88% of the companies in the S&P 500 have a majority ownership of just 3 companies, which is BlackRock, which is the biggest fund manager in the world with about $9-10 trillion under management, State Street, and Vanguard. So of all the companies in the S&P 500, which remember the S&P 500 are the 500 largest publicly traded companies in the United States, these 3 companies have a majority of 88% of them. So you can wonder why we have this situation where all the companies kind of are doing everything that's politically correct. It's because of that. Now, there is a monopoly rule in the United States where you can't have a monopoly of over 50%. So it's going to be interesting. One of the presidential candidates, I think it's Vivek or Viven, I'm not even going to try to say his last name, but he was actually bringing this up where, we have these monopoly rules in the United States, and these companies literally are owning the majority of all these other companies, and they can basically dictate to these companies what they want them to do. Ergo, for example, what happened with Budweiser. Overseas market news, the markets in Europe mostly negative. The Swiss stock exchange went down over 12%, biggest loser there. Latin America was mostly mixed as well. The only positive one in there was Colombia, my dear Colombia. Africa and the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, biggest loser there at over 4%. And then in the far east, we have most of the markets down, with the TAIEX in Taiwan being down over 2.60%. Bitcoin and crypto, WorldCoin, which you remember, it's a project where the founder, Sam Altman of the ChatGPT AI software, started this as well, where it scans your eyeball in order to get WorldCoin, which is a crypto, awards and all kinds of things. Kenya suspended the WorldCoin project due to safety concerns. Other than that, not a lot of news in the crypto space. Bitcoin is lower this week, down 0.66% to just over 29,100. And in commodities, world food prices have jumped by the most in 1.5 years or 18 months. We had that huge surge during the pandemic year, 2020. And then if I'm not mistaken, I think since the half of about 2021, June, July, prices are kind of been stabilizing for the most part, but now they went up quite a bit. Oil is headed for its largest monthly increase since in over a year, as the market starts to see a little bit of tightening. Saudi Arabia and Russia are continuing to cut their supply through September, their supply cuts. So that obviously is going to affect quite a bit the price of oil. The 6th consecutive week of gains. U.S. crude went up almost 3% to 82.82, while Brent, which is the international crude, went up 1.47% to 86.24. BRICS, the countries of BRICS is not an economic group. Let's call it like a hangout session of countries. We have Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now, this term was brought when I was in high school. I mean, when was that? In the 90s? Such a long time ago. It was a term that was brought up by Wall Street or the finance guys, where basically just calling these group of countries like the new future, right? All these emerging countries. South Africa isn't doing much, but the rest are moving quite a bit. So the percentage of the share of the economy, of the world GDP, these countries now have a majority in the version of PPP, purchase power parity. Purchase power parity. You guys know what I mean? You guys can look up the difference. So they actually have a bigger percentage now compared to the G7, which was all the big Western European countries, United States, obviously, and they always had they controlled everything because they had the biggest economy. Well, now that's starting to change. So when you look at just the countries, for example, from Pakistan to India, Bangladesh, China, in that little circle, 50% of the population of the world lives. So not only are they getting to be a much bigger percentage of what the kind of old biggest percentage used to be, kind of the old powers that be, they also have the biggest population. So it's important to note that they've announced that they're going to come out with a gold-backed currency compared to the United States, where we used to have a gold-backed currency, but now it's a credit-based currency where it's on the full faith of the U.S. government. And it's a growing initiative now that has more and more nations wanting to sign up because obviously it seems like the tides are turning for the United States. Gold went down 0.86% to $19.43.60, while silver went down close to 3% to $23.73. Finance and banking news, according to an online real estate portal called myelisting.com, they connected the U.S. migration data and saw that California lost $343 million in tax revenue, while New York lost $299 million. Wasn't last year, it was in 2021. And the amount of people that are leaving these great communist people's republics in 2022, which was last year in California, there was 343,000 people that left, almost 300,000 people in New York, and over 140,000 people in Illinois. The other big ones were New Jersey, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I believe I said New Jersey in there, didn't I? U.S. government now is on a spending binge. We're going to start spending close to $1 trillion on an annualized basis. Our spending has surged by over 50% in the past year. So the Biden administration doing awesome things. Bank of England is raising its main interest rate by 25 basis points, or 0.25 basically, to 5.25. It's the record 14th consecutive hike. They also expect the price of inflation, the target to get down, not the target, but the percentage of inflation to get down at 5%. It's down from the previous, or right now 7.9. They expect it to get to 5% by the end of 2023. Sorry, I mixed my words there for a second. Political news. A mysterious Chinese biolab was discovered in a remote California city. And the question is, why would a Chinese company be running a biolab at a rural town in California? They found 900 genetically engineered mice to catch and carry COVID, and they're also living in an inhumane condition. It was supposed to be some kind of storage facility until they found a garden hose kind of hanging out of the wall. Iran is shut down for 2 days due to the unprecedented heat. They called it a public holiday on Wednesday and Thursday due to the fact that they reached temperatures up to 51 degrees Celsius or 123 degrees Fahrenheit. And Pfizer officials in a Senate hearing in Australia said that their employees were given a special batch of the thing in your arm from the pandemic, not the same one that was rolled out to the public. Huh. What do you know about that? It's probably just a conspiracy theory. Economic news, the Italy's economy performed unexpectedly poor in quarter two. It contracted by 0.30%, which is going to put some pressure on the new Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, as the government tries to tackle the effects of high inflation. The Eurozone business activity decelerated in July. That went down to 48.6, which indicates contraction. And even Hong Kong's business activity fell into contraction for the first time in 2023. So again, you can see the stock market is doing amazing things, but the numbers aren't showing that same result. U.S. job openings fell to its lowest level in over 2 years in June. There remains a level consistent with tight labor conditions, which is a bad thing because that if we have a tight labor market, quote unquote, it means that the economy is doing good, quote unquote, according to the central bank. So they can leave the interest rates elevated for some time, which is a very bad thing for the economy. The U.S. economy is adding fewer jobs than expected in July, with an increase of 187,000, solid wage gains, and a decline in the unemployment rate down to 3.5%. Again, continued tightness in the labor market, which means that the central bank is most likely going to see a quote-unquote good economy, which isn't good because they're going to leave the interest rates where they are or raise them even more, which is not a good thing for the economy overall. And in corporate news, companies with a good ESG score have been found to pollute as much just as the low-rated rivals. If you don't know what ESG is, it's like the political, woke, progressive, you're saving the environment score that they give a lot of these companies, which I think is hilarious because, I mean, it goes back to what I just said about the three hedge funds basically owning the majority of 88% of the biggest public companies in the United States. They just like create these rules for people to follow, and at the end of the day it's just all politics, because if the ones with the good environmental score essentially are polluting the same as the ones that don't have a good score, well, you know what I mean. Amazon rose over 8% after they had strong Q2 results. The revenue rose by over 11%. PayPal shares fell over 12% after their numbers were in line with results and guidance, but they said that the number of active accounts actually fell in the last quarter. Expedia fell over 16% after they missed their numbers on revenue. Nintendo, after, the big Super Mario Brothers film, their revenue went up, the net sales went up by over 50%, while the Q2 profit came in at 52% higher than the previous year. So they seem like they're booming. Maersk, which is the second largest shipping firm, on Friday reported a fall in Q2 earnings thanks to the falling container rates to ship items. Maersk, being the second largest shipping firm in the world, they're kind of measured by not a standard, but they're kind of looked at as the barometer of what's going on with the global economy, because obviously if they're not shipping as much containers and the revenue goes down, that means that the economy isn't doing as well. So that again is another indication of things aren't going well in the actual economy. AMD, the chip company, plans to invest about $400 million in India, build the firm's largest design center, and add over 3,000 engineering jobs. In trade news, the Chinese Commerce Minister on Monday announced that they're going to start putting export controls on some drones and drone-related equipment. It says it wants to safeguard national security and interests amid this escalating situation with the U.S. over technology. And Ukraine and Croatia are agreeing on the possibility of using a Croatian port to export the Ukrainian grains that they can't do anymore because of the war with Russia. And, Russia's blocking that whole, their ports basically. And remember that Russia was in an agreement with the UN, a UN brokered deal where they were going to allow them to ship the grain out of the U.S. ports, but Russia backed out of that deal. So now they're looking at another deal because the Ukraine is extremely vital to global food supply. In technology, new treatments in Alzheimer's disease work are removing the toxic proteins called beta amyloid from the brain. It's going to be the first drug that actually offers some slowing of the deadly disease to over 6.5 million Americans with Alzheimer's in the U.S. Obviously, Americans are in the U.S. And then investment news, I mentioned to you guys, there was a report where California spent $17.5 billion. I believe that was over the last 10 years. But they spent it on the homelessness crisis, and the homeless population grew. I think at this point, the homeless situation in California is a business for the government, so they don't want it to stop. That's why it's not getting smaller. And one of the ironic things about California is that they could have used that same amount of money, $17 billion, to pay the rent for all the homeless people. It's like, where is all that money going? That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. And remember, the preppers were right.